Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, resident _of Collinwood for BitChute. I'm here to continue my read-along reviews for John Philip Betancourt's continuing blog series, The Return of Dark Shadows. I also do revisited tours, and I haven't done one of my revisited tour read-alongs in a while. I'm gonna try to do one Wednesday night. So this one's the new one. This one dropped today. It's Series 12, Chapter 5, Deeper into Deja Vu. The midday sun couldn't be brighter. It stunned the eyes and warmed the skin. It was as if everything its rays touched were thawed into the breath of spring. With every grace of sunlight, that ushered in a rebirth of spring to the main valley of Collinsport, a renaissance and new beginning was also afoot. And for India and Justin, their nerves were rightfully on edge from what they had witnessed just the night before. The real renaissance and rebirth, a new rejuvenated awakened Barnabas Collins. Awakening of Barnabas Collins, I'm sorry. Together, Justin and India paced back and forth into a worry-filled dance in a back study at Collinwood. They had carved wooden moldings of gargoyles staring down at them like devils from the doorway. The room smelled of tobacco. It was one of Roger's favorite smoking rooms, even though Elizabeth had always asked him to stay in the real smoking room just off in the west wing of the house that was purposely designed for his late-night pipe puffs. The spring sun shined in the room in kaleidoscope patterns of leaves and branches. From the large oak trees that sprawled the front lawn like giants holding out their arms, the windows that faced this direction were large and were the first to welcome the morning sun. But when darkness fell at night, they seemed to peer off into an abyss of blackness and shadows with no light from the outside. India, still in Vicky's body, walked over to a desk in the corner of the room that was almost invisible because it was made of a wood that matched the wood panels on the wall. She turned on a lamp and allowed the orange light to shine on her face, showing just how worried she was about what Barnabas had planned for that night. A plan that required her help in the most important of parts to his reconstruction of how he first met the family, as to finally correct all the errors of the first time. I know you're scared, but you have to be brave. This is it. This is what's going to get you back to your time, Justin said, his face worn from a lack of sleep. I don't know how much longer I can be here. My family, my dad. India paused, realizing that her dad in 2019 was also her dad in 1966. Just 50 years younger. It's all just... It's a mess, she finished. Do you trust Barnabas? Do you think he'll do what he said he would? I don't know how any of this works. I just don't know what to think, Justin said, his brain still unable to comprehend exactly what he saw as Barnabas came out of his coffin the night before. I think I have to trust him. What choice do I have? He has me like a prisoner of time. If I don't trust him and let him do... If I don't trust him and let him do what he needs to do, I'll never get back to my time, India said, staring at herself in another picture frame that reflected Vicky's face back to her. But what if it's all a trick? What if he's pulling us into a trap? I mean, my God, he's. Justin couldn't bring himself to say the word that meant a person of the undead, a person who needed the blood of others to live, themselves a creature of immortal and thirst for blood. Stop, just stop, India said quickly, standing up to quell Justin. I have to do what he says, or else I'd be stuck here. I can't stay here, she said. Justin knew she had to go back, even if it meant that she'd be leaving him, even if it meant whatever friendship or more would end. It was the right thing to do, no matter how many misgivings they had about Barnabas. How did he know to go to the other house? The one that's all run down. How did he know that? Justin wondered about the place where Barnabas was currently hiding, before deep below the old house floors, awaiting the night to reveal himself again to the current Collins family of 1966. I don't really know much about him other than a few myths, sorry. I mean, no one really had time to explain to me who he was other than he was once married to Julia Hoffman and that my father later marries Julia and Barnabas' adopted daughter. Everyone in 2019 seems to revere him but also fear him. They love him but they hate him. My uncle Gabriel sort of warned me just before all this happened. Indy explained, pausing as she remembered how fearful her maternal uncle Gabriel was when he finally introduced India to her Collins side. He what? Justin wondered. He knew, he must have known all about this Barnabas and what he was and where he came from. He was scared for me. He was worried that I'd somehow fall into danger. He must have, India included with a slight sadness in her voice, understanding Gabriel was protecting her from the Collins family all her life. You know, we could do something else, Justin remembered suddenly as he turned to a small globe standing next to the desk and spun it. What do you mean? She wondered. You mentioned Julia Hoffman when we met. If we don't trust Barnabas and how he's handling all this, we could always try Julia again. That is, if you sorry, if you think she is the person who could get you back to Bangor, is still an option. And that's where Julia is, Justin continued. Dr. Hoffman, Julia said in a whisper. Maybe she'll know what to do. That Barnabas is free if she thinks we can trust him. Then maybe we can, and we don't have to worry so much, Justin said. Indy began to mull it over. She knew that Julia and Barnabas had a special relationship and eventually would marry, but they needed to find her before he did and make sure she could actually help. Barnabas was a live wire. Could he be trusted? No one knew. Would he really do what he promised and send India home as soon as he made all things right? Another mystery. Okay, we'll go find her as soon as I help Barnabas tonight. When he comes to the main house to meet the family, you and I will get to Bangor and find Julia. I feel like I could trust her more with all this. She'd understand. She'd be key to it all, India said, agreeing. I'd I'll head home and shower and change, maybe nap even, Justin said. You should rest, India said as she stood up and walked over to him from around the desk and put her hands on his arm. Justin looked over at Vicky's face. He knew deep inside was India, the young woman he met over a week ago, and almost hit with his car. He knew he was looking at her face that wasn't hers. He knew deep in his heart that his feelings were starting to grow, and they were for India. and Vicky's face was not changing at. Justin smirked and slightly tilted his head and leaned down to kiss India on Victoria's lips, but India pulled away. I'm I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Did I read that wrong? Justin worried as India stepped back. No, I'm sorry. I just feel like I'm not myself, India said, looking down at the body she was in. But I see you. I see India. Really, I do, Justin replied. India smiled. She could tell it was someone she could trust right off the bat. There was something warming and safe about him. She sorry. She really wanted to kiss him, but the situation was too hazardous for them to start anything. Her time in Collinsport 1966 would hopefully come to an end, and where India planned on going, Justin could not follow. Justin, I like you a lot, but you know, we we just can't, India said. Justin smiled softly. He knew she was right. It wasn't meant to be. That they even knew each other. They shouldn't be in the same world, the same time. It was all a blur of reality and fantasy and confusion because of Barnabas attempting and correcting all the hurt he had caused in his first awakening. I should go, Justin sounding depressed disappointed. Justin, India said as Justin turned back around, seeing India in the bright spring sunlight from the large windows. I'm sorry, she said in a whisper. Forget it, huh? It was It is what it is, I guess, Justin said. I'll be back later tonight so we can get to Hoffman, Justin continued as he smiled sweetly, then stammered off to sleep some of the previous night away, leaving India feeling guilty, sad, and alone in the bright study off the west wing. In the tea room at the Collins Port Inn, Arabella sat with her legs crossed in a finely stitched Chanel dress, her neck wrapped in three strands of perfectly cultured strands of white pearls. Sorry, a second. Glasses. Okay. Oh, that's better. Yeah, wrapped in three strands of perfectly white pearls, she sipped her tea and watched as the onlookers from town stared at her new, fresh face. Once in a while, she'd wink at a woman's husband who stared too long. Her approach to get what she felt she deserved from the Collins family for what she saw was terrible treatment of her missing brother Paul seemed to be working. Carolyn had been manipulated to get rid of her rival for her mother's affections, thus keeping Arabella's hands clean of any blood that would be spilled, and Elizabeth was just days away from writing $1 million check to keep her silence over what she knew. Her plan worked out better than she had dreamed, all thanks to Bureau and his expert detective work. Ma'am, there's a phone call, one of the hotel clerks said, handing Arabella a white phone with a very long cord. For me, she wondered. It's Miss Stoddard, the clerk said, knowing exactly who Carolyn Stoddard was. Arab- Arabella quickly grabbed the phone and removed one of her pearl earrings for a better listen on the phone. Carolyn, Arabella asked as soon as the clerk walked off. Aunt Bella, hi, I'm glad you're still there. I need to talk to you. Carolyn said, her call coming from a payphone in town and her voice loud and clear, attempting to talk over passing cars. Where are you? Arabella wondered, hearing the background. I needed a safe place to talk to you on. I'm at a payphone in town, Carolyn confirmed. Honey, why didn't you just come to the hotel? I didn't want anyone to hear the full conversation. At least this way, if someone overhears, they only hear one side, Carolyn replied cleverly to Arabella's surprise. Has something happened? Well, yes and no. Last night, your Calvert and I were talking, and a few things came up. Nothing for you to be worried about. I think I have a way to handle you know who and you know what, Carolyn said cryptically. You talked to Bureau. I see, Arabella answered skeptically. Carolyn knew what she was doing, and what exactly did you and Bureau talk about? Nothing that would put our plan off, I hope, Arabella answered passive aggressively. No, no, not at all. I didn't tell him anything that would interrupt our plan, Carolyn said as she tried to keep her voice down so that man waiting his turn at the payphone booth didn't hear her. But he has this sister that I knew. Well, that I know. She and I used to be friends, and we had a falling out, but I think I can get her to help us with, well, I can get some help from her, and she wouldn't even know she was helping. Does that make sense? Carolyn asked her conniving aunt. Arabella tried to add two and two together as Carolyn was being slightly covert with what she was saying, but it was a puzzle that only had a few pieces. It was easy to make sense of it. And Arabella was fine with Carolyn doing most of the dirty work to off Vicky. Honey, whatever you think is best for the situation, as long as you think you can handle it, I'm for it. You do what you want. Just keep me in the loop as best as you can. Does that sound alright? Arabella answered. So you're okay with me speaking with Noelle? I won't tell her, of course, what I need help with. I'll be as discreet and as vague as possible. I just want it to be done and over with, Carolyn asked, despite her initial misgivings and second thoughts about the whole idea of killing Vicky to secure her place as the only heiress of her mother's fortune. This was music to Arabella's ears. Things were progressing perfectly. Soon she'd have her money, and she'd be on the next flight out of the country, leaving the Collins family, hopefully in ruins as they fall out over Vicky's murder, would fall in the hands of Carolyn, thus destroying Elizabeth in the process. That sounds perfect, Arabella said with a purr in her voice. The two stuttered women hung up their ends of the line. Arabella, satisfied with her trip to leave the family in tatters to their treatment of her brother, and Carolyn, feeling like she was helping her cause, the lies and the manipulation by her Aunt Arabella fully entrenched in her brain. It was a perfect storm of destruction, a train headed for off a cliff. Death was near. As the sun and the crows began to swirl in large flocks as the sun set and the crows began to swirl in large flocks around the large oak trees surrounding Collinwood, awaiting the dark sky, many people inside the house were about to put on a show of lies, deception, a show of hidden secrets that would ultimately lead to final exposure. Elizabeth, her brother, Roger, an unwelcome guest who crashed an early dinner, sat in the drawing room sipping on after dinner dessert wine. Their guest for that evening had come in a form the inn in town, Arabella started, her bewitching green eyes constantly shifting to Elizabeth to see if the Collins matriarch would crack under her persistent pressure. The truth of Victoria Winter's connection to the family burned on Arabella's tongue, and she wanted to scream it from the mountain tops to expose Liz and her betrayal. But money made everything work in her favor. Arabella would rather have $1 million check in her name than real satisfaction revenge for her brother Paul and for Elizabeth's suffering. One more night with Arabella, who knew her presence was just one more heavy pill for Elizabeth to swallow and pretend everything was normal. Things were never normal. All of this was to keep her secret, keep the lie safe, keep everyone away from the truth, keep Elizabeth world as intact as it was, and keep Victoria in the dark about her past. That was paramount in the matriarch's mind. The threat of exposure of her secret child was a death knell that Liz did not want to hear. As the three sat in awkward small talk, sipping their after dinner drinks, another part of the puzzle was about to reveal itself. India, inside Vicky's body, came into the room, her face a tapestry of excitement, nerves, and worry. It was just one more person playing a role. Vicky, good evening, Roger said first. Can I pour you a drink? He added as Arabella looked on, as this being one of the first times she saw Vicky in the flesh. Elizabeth noticed Arabella's glaze and began to feel uncomfortable, her real-life secret standing literally between the two startled women. No, thank you, Roger. Actually, I'm here with a very big surprise. You'll never guess who I ran into town in the village. Never in your wildest dreams, India said in Vicky's soft, bubbly voice, as she began to make up a story about how she ran into Barnabas by chance in a random bumping into in town. The others looked confused, and the sensation of the surprise and jubilation was a foreign feeling to them. As India continued to explain how she met the mysterious man, they all looked toward the entrance to the drawing room, and in walked a living piece of art. The surprised second Barnabas Collins, his hair slicked to the side, his eyes dark and mysterious, his lips a quiver, and a lively rose pink, freshly touched by the winter-like wind from the outdoors. Mrs. Stoddard, this is Barna. India began before being interrupted by Liz's shocked gasp. Barnabas Collins? It can't be. It's impossible. The matriarch said, stunned by his resemblance to the painting in her foyer. But how? Roger replied in the same amount of shock. The second Barnabas Collins, the second Barnabas confirmed with a very friendly grin. It's a pleasure to meet you all, and by the look on your face I can see that you do recognize me, or shall I say him, he too said, referring to the portrait in the foyer. He was passing off as his great-grandfather. But how is this possible? The likeness, it's impeccable, Elizabeth asked. I know it does seem jarring when you get a good look at the two of us, Barnabas said with a wicked smirk. The Collins blood is very strong, as you can see. I don't understand what the hell is going on, Arabella asked as she stood up to meet the new stranger in the room. Barnabas turned to the red-headed Arabella and felt a tingle go down his spine. Her energy was like a jolt. of electricity that turned his insides into sparks. He could feel her cruelty. It was the same feeling he got when he was around Angelique Bouchard, the witch who cast him into darkness. Barnabas slowly walked over to the new face in the house. The first time he came to Collinsport, she was not there. This was a different faction of his existence, but her aura was evil, warned him she needed to be watched. Please let me explain, Barnabas said to Arabella first, then back to the others. I've come all the way from England in hopes to meet my American cousins, distant cousins. I perhaps should have called sooner and made myself known in a different way, but the intrusion and obvious shock, and for the intrusion and obvious shock, I apologize. Everyone froze for a moment, staring at the man they couldn't believe real. Then Elizabeth, ever the proud and astute hostess, broke the awkward silence. Oh, please, it's fine. We're just a bit surprised to see how much you look like, well, he must be your great grandfather, Elizabeth said, trying to settle all their nerves. Thank you, Elizabeth. Cousin Elizabeth. And yes, he was my great grandfather, Barnabas said in a charming tone, smirking his toothy white grin over the glowing Elizabeth. How did you know where to find us? Roger asked, his lips stained with brandy. Collinwood is all I've ever heard about as a child. The family tree, this place, this land, it's like I've always been here. It's like I've never set foot in England, Barnabas explained. Arabella muttered to herself, unsure if she believed him or not. I just had to see you all as soon as I got to town. Miss Winters and I had a chance meeting in the village, and as soon as I discovered her connection to the family up on Widow's Hill, I thought what a wonderful twist of fate it was truly meant for me to come tonight, Barnabas explained, his cover seeming to convince the family. A Collins in England. I had no idea we still had distant relatives across the pond. This is remarkable, Roger added, still in a boozy voice. Indeed, Elizabeth exclaimed, her eager eyes taking in every inch of her handsome English cousin, sorry. Well, this is no way to welcome a Collins with confused reactions and downright slack-jawed faces, now is it? She added, shaking her head of all her questions. Welcome to Collinwood, she gleefully added. Barnabas smiled at Liz and playfully winked at the gawking Arabella, an attempt to win her over. It was all so familiar to him, the game, the lie, the push to get in good with the family. He had heard this before from her. He had seen it all before, of course, in different circumstances, in different ways, in different bend of time. It was all sort of mirror image of his first time meeting Elizabeth, but things were different in just the slightest of ways. He knew, of course, of India's bodily presence being the reason for the changes to the first reality, mainly Arabella's presence. Barnabas leaned down and kissed the back of Elizabeth's well-manicured hand. He looked over at her, and their eyes met. Friendly, kind, odd, she said suddenly, with a strange feeling suddenly came over Liz. India panicked as Liz's sudden pause. What is it? India asked, unsure of what was coming next, perhaps their secret exposed. I feel like I've done this before, like I've talked to you before, Barnabas. A deja vu, but how? We didn't even know you existed, or that you were coming, Liz said. Well, we're family. With my face, of course, it's hung up in your foyer for years. That is my great grandfather's face, Barnabas said, covering. But how is it we've never heard of you, or at least the rest of the Collins family in England? Why is this the first time? Roger asked as Arabella's eyes began to scan Barnabas for a wedding ring. To Arabella, another Collins man, single, would be her crown jewel of husbands. This is a very good question. Distant relatives often don't have the ability to know each other in the flesh, especially when time begins to chip away at the generations. You see, I am the last Collins alive in England of our family, Barnabas said. My entire mission was to come back here to reconnect with my roots, right some wrongs, fix the odds and ends. Your and your wife? Arabella asked with a shark's eye and hunger. Barnabas turned to her again. He had no idea how to respond to her. He already could feel she was not to be trusted. You have to excuse my sister-in-law, Barnabas. She's visiting from San Francisco, and she gets quite attached to the idea of. Roger stopped himself before getting off. Color came out of his mouth in front of his employee, Victoria. Never mind. Besides, she was just leaving. I was, Arabella answered, confused. Yes, I'll take you back to the hotel. Barnabas, please make yourself at home. Arabella, I'll get your coat, Roger said, seeing that Arabella already wanted to sink her hooks into Barnabas and whatever money he may possess. Mr. Collins, Mr. Barnabas Collins, it was a pleasure to meet you, Arabella said, extending her hand to the new family as India looked on with hand trembling for Arabella's safety. Barnabas grabbed Arabella's hand. He could feel her skin, warm and soft like the perfect kiss. He could feel every cell in her body racing out in the crimson rivers of her blood. He kissed her hand, and it was as if something electric touched his lips. She winked at him and sauntered over to Roger, who was impatiently trying to get rid of her for Barnabas's sake, for everyone's sake. All right, let's go, Roger snapped. I should check on David, India said too as she quickly left the room. Allow Barnabas the full stage as he attempted the first round of fixing the wrongs he had done the first time in 1966. I really did not mean to intrude and break up your get-together. Had I known, I would have waited for tomorrow to come see you, all Barnabas said to Elizabeth, who quickly took her place back on the sofa. Sorry. Barnabas, please. Barnabas, yes, Liz said, smiling. I am elated to see your face, to see how well the Collins bloodline has kept up with our final English ancestor. I truly am. But as you can imagine, the household is a bit upset, and I would hate for you to get the wrong impression of us so soon, Elizabeth explained. Of course, I understand. I did intrude, Barnabas answered. No, 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 not in the way you think. Really, it's a great pleasure to have you, Liz said, as Barnabas could feel she had more to say. Are you all right, Elizabeth? He asked. It's just, I have a strange feeling that I can tell you everything, but I really shouldn't, Elizabeth said. Barnabas sat down across from Elizabeth. He knew that because this was his second coming to this time fragment, that there was already a building closeness to Elizabeth. She knew it too, although she could not imagine why. Elizabeth chalked it up to them being related. But the truth was they had years and years of being close, just in a different time fragment. Elizabeth had no idea she was repeating her own life, but she was. He looked into Liz's eyes, and it was as worlds opened up. He grabbed her hand and felt an energy flow from her to him, like a fire burning deep within their touching skin. And with Barnabas' electric mystical touch, Elizabeth opened up about everything that her home life so had her home life so upset, as she put it, how Arabella was blackmailing her, how she needed to give her money to keep a secret as and soon leave town with it, how she was waiting for the company check to arrive before giving it to Arabella so that she could leave, how she was risking so much keeping the secret that had to be kept to save her from ruin and embarrassment and scandal all over town. Elizabeth poured her heart out to Barnabas like she had never done before, not in any time period, not in any time fragment. It was an Elizabeth full of trust and concern and hope that she could be rid of the cancer that was Arabella on her life. Elizabeth believed that she could not allow the secret about Victoria to be out. She could not allow, and Arabella was a ticking time bomb. Anything that stopped her from getting her money would, in Elizabeth's words, destroy me completely. So you see why I had to suffer for this dinner tonight. Roger doesn't know anything. I can never tell him. I just have to continue to play the part, swallow my pride, and let Arabella run around calling sport until I get her the money, and then hopefully be rid of her forever. I'm so embarrassed to have to tell you this on our first meeting, Liz said. Not at all, Elizabeth. Not at all. We're family after it all. It is a pleasure. It pleases me to see that you trust me so, Barnabas explained, and so quickly. Liz laughed. Thank you for listening. I wouldn't have been able to tell anyone else, and getting all that off my chest, well, it made me feel better, she added. I'm sorry this has happened to you, Barnabas said, as his serum touch wore off on his distant cousin, and Liz looked at the clock, seeing that so much time of the evening had passed. My goodness, I can't believe I burdened you with all this family drama all this time. I can assure you I wouldn't have said anything if I didn't need to take it out of with someone. Where are you staying, Barnabas? Not in town, I hope. We have so much better rooms here. Sorry, Liz asked sweetly. Well, actually, if you wouldn't mind, I would prefer more independent quarters. Oh, so you are at the inn in town, Elizabeth responded disappointedly. Well, no, not exactly. You see, cousin, I grew up with stories upon stories of the old house. I'd like to stay there. I'd certainly be out of your way, and yet we'd be close enough to see each other as much as possible. I'd love to learn more about the New England family. It would mean the world to me. And allow me to stay there, Barnabas. If you allowed me to stay there, Barnabas said to Elizabeth's shock. The old house? But it's in such disrepair, I couldn't allow that, she replied, not knowing Barnabas had already set himself up in the basement of the old house with Justin and India's help the night before. Trust me, cousin Elizabeth, I am very resourceful and have all the intentions to make that place as good as new. not only for me, but for this family and our history. Refurbishing the old house to its former glory would be a dream come true, Barnabas said. Elizabeth took a pause to think. She was unsure how much this Barnabas the second actually knew about the family. Sorry. The stories he may have heard worried her to Elizabeth. The dark side of the family perhaps may be something this Barnabas needn't know, even though he knew it all too well. What exactly did you learn about our family, Barnabas? Did you hear many stories about us? Elizabeth asked, but Shrinley felt like she already knew the answer. Oh, endless stories, Barnabas and Elizabeth said together at the exact same time, shocking Elizabeth. Barnabas, why did I know you were going to say that? Why is it I'm feeling like I've had this conversation before? Like I've been in this room with you talking as we are now. That can't be possible, can it? Elizabeth asked, unsure of what was really happening. It could not, Barnabas said, his voice sounding cold with worry that Elizabeth may be catching on to what was happening. This has never happened, Elizabeth. It has never, ever happened, Barnabas said, again his voice filling her brain and taking hold of her thoughts for a split second. Elizabeth felt at ease again. Her strange feeling that she was oddly repeating a portion of her life began to dissipate. It was a control function Barnabas was good at. It was a tactic he was able to use often, that many times before he has saved his life. Mind control. You must think me foolish. Please forgive me, Barnabas, Elizabeth said as Barnabas' control lifted from her brain. Perhaps it's deja vu again, but I feel so rather fond of you in such a short amount of time that it feels like you've come in like a breath of fresh air. Like an old friend I haven't seen in ages, Elizabeth said shyly. Barnabas looked at his cousin and could feel her still searching for answers in her mind. But that sensation slowly faded away as Elizabeth gave into the feeling that it was all just a mind game of her own design. We're family. The Collins blood is thick with generational connection after connection. You can feel it, can't you? It's just our way. It's just our family ties. I feel it too, Barnabas replied, comforting her further. Liz smiled. She felt a strange feeling of dread mixed with safety. It frightened her, but yet she felt comfortable with her new cousin. Okay, I've thought it over, and I'd be fine with you staying in the old house under one condition. You'll come here as often as you like. Do not be a stranger, she giggled. But please, if you want for anything, let me know. Like I said, the old house needs a lot, and money is no object for your comfort there. I really want to make sure you stay here with us as a good one for however long that is, Liz said. Yes, for however long, Barnabas answered. It was clear to him now that there was yet another obstacle to take care of in this second coming. He had not foreseen Arabella's arrival, and her meddling and blackmail, or Arabella's hold on Elizabeth, could alter the future. If she had not come to Collinsport on Barnabas's original foray into the 1960s, he knew she had to be dealt with. He knew she had to be neutralized before her plots became even more convoluted and tangled. If he allowed her to continue to roam the streets of Collinsport the way she was looting the family of $1 million, keeping Elizabeth on a tight leash, There was no way he could finally fix the wrongs he had done to this generation of Colin's family members freely, and he was thirsty, and Arabella might just provide for the perfect nightcap. Sorry, guys. In a waiting car just outside the iron gates of the Collinwood estate, Justin Patterson puffed a large white cloud of smoke out of his driver's side window. The red 1962 Buick passenger side flung open, and India Dare Archer jumped in, still trapped in Vicky's body. If we really gotta stop meeting like this, Justin joked to Vicky's eye roll. Barnabas has his side handled. He's smoozing with the family. The coast is clear, Indy replied as she buckled in. Was that safe, leaving the whole family with a vampire who hasn't had a drop of blood in, well, who knows how long? Justin worried as the car drove off to Bangor to find Julia Hoffman. Before we came in, Barnabas handled his business. India Galt found a few woodland animals, and, well, you can guess the rest, she explained. Jesus, Justin gasped. As you can, are you sure you can trust him? I feel like a broken record, like I keep asking you the same question, but I don't know how, if we can, I don't know what makes sense anymore. Can we trust him? He again emphasized. I don't have a choice, Justin. It's either stay in this body in this time for, or in this time forever, or allow Barnabas to carry out his plan note for note, which is why I guess it's better for us to bring in Julia. If Barnabas fails in getting what he wants out of this time, then she's the only one that can help. I have to believe that, India said. You're right. Not to put all your eggs in Barnabas's basket. Doing this, getting Julie involved too, is a safety net, India. I can feel it. I really can, Justin said, assuring her. As their conversation progressed, time seemed to escape. The 45-minute southeast drive to Bangor flew by, and by almost midnight they had arrived on Sain Street, the street of Wyncliffe Sanitarium. It was a foggy, wooded street with almost no street lamps. The darkness from the margin of the road almost seemed to seep in like black water, slowly, deeply, and mysteriously. It didn't take long. Wyncliffe was the distance. They could see all the lights on, and what looked like a giant ranch-style house with 3 floors and white walls and 2 green shutters that hugged each of the windows. Justin and India slowly made their nervous walk up the slick path to the front of the sanitarium, hoping everything would work out. It had to. Julia had to help. As they walked into the lobby, they could see a man on the front desk signing paperwork facing a nurse who seemed to be consoling him. It was almost midnight. Justin and India felt awed that someone was being admitted so late, but at the same time, they knew if someone was being admitted, that meant an attending doctor would have to be available. Sorry, the only one at Wyncliffe was Julia Hoffman. Sorry, I thought I heard something. She'd got to be here. She's got to be here, India whispered. Now, doll, you'll have to remember that this is the best for you and for your wife. It's going to be fine. You'll see, a nurse said to the man who suddenly revealed a small boy about 5 years old, huddled between his father's legs. Justin's eyes watered at this sight. A boy feeling the sadness of his father and confusion for his missing mother at Wyncliffe, a sanitarium. It was all too familiar. It was all too real. Something similar had happened to him when he was young. His father, too, had to bring his mother to a sanitarium. His father, too, had to be the only parent while his mother was locked away at a place for the mad, the crazy, and the mentally unstable. The flashback gave Justin second thoughts. We have to go. This isn't right. Justin said as India grabbed his hand and squeezed tightly. She had no idea of his past, but instinctively she knew he needed to feel secure somehow. Shh, India comforted. Can I help you? The nurse said as the man and his son passed Justin and India. The boy and Justin made eye contact as they walked past. We need to see Dr. Hoffman. It's an emergency, India said. Sorry, doll, we're only allowing late night admittance. You won't be able to see the doctor or any of the attending doctors until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, the nurse rattled off. I said it was an emergency. Please, I have to see her, India pushed. Miss, I don't like repeating myself, but I will one more time, the nurse said forcefully as she stood up from her chair, revealing a hefty frame. She come back at 9 a.m., she repeated. I don't think you understand. This is a matter of life and death. And Justin began before the nurse continued to rebuff their request. It caused a whole argument when finally, from out of the side door marked staff, Dr. Julia Hoffman appeared, seemingly appalled by all the noise. What is this all about? Julia said, dropped her clipboard on the nurse's desk. India was instantly frozen in shock. Julia remarkably looked the same, although slightly a bit younger, but it was her. It was the exact woman she had met in the Collins family foyer in 2019, the doctor that told her if she needed help to find her. Well, India found her. Dr. Hoffman, I'm so glad I found you. Please, you have to help me. I've been trapped here. It'll sound insane when I explain, but you have to believe me. I'm from India. Paused. She couldn't believe what she was going to say next to the doctor of psychology in a mental hospital. I'm from another time, she heard herself say, sounding ridiculous. Another time, Julia repeated with a strange look on her face. I know how that sounds. I know it must bring up red flags all over me, but I need you to trust me that I know you and that I'm from the year 2019. Okay, let's be calm about this. Tell me again how we know each other. It's a very long story, Justin interjected. Is that so? Julia said, taking out a blank pad to write down what she was hearing. I know it sounds insane, but it's the truth. And there's much, much more, India continued. We don't use that word here, miss, Julia replied, allowing for India to say her name. India de Archo, Miss de Archo, we don't use that word. Insane or crazy or mad. None of those words. Nothing is out of the ordinary. Everything here at Wincliffe is ordinary, normal, real. I try to make sure the to my patients believe and trust where I come from when I speak to them and we discuss the world that they live in. Do you understand me? Julia asked as India shook her head yes. And who are you? Julia then asked, turning to Justin Patterson. Doctor, India's friend, and I can vouch for her. I met her just a few weeks ago, and she didn't look like this. She was herself. She was in her own body and form, and then something happened to her, and she turned into this person you see in this body isn't hers, Justin explained, also feeling like the story was completely bizarre to tell a doctor in a mental hospital. And Barnabas has come back. He's come back. Barnabas Collins in Collinsport, India said as Julia looked at her with weary eyes. Barnabas, she said. Although the name was so familiar, it rang in her ear as if she had heard it just the other day. Yes, your husband. Well, he isn't your husband until, well, later in your life. But that's the whole thing. He has me trapped in this time so that I can help him with the wrongs of his life. He's he come back from the dead, India said. Julia's brow lifted. She was unsure of what was happening with the two young people in front of her. Was one having a mental breakdown? Were they both having a breakdown? The story they were weaving was almost out of science fiction, but Julia could tell the two new faces at Wincliffe really believed what they were saying, which made her job at Wincliffe attending doctor that much more important. It was her job to guide visitation with the mental infirm. Were they? Julia, of course, not knowing it was all true and that her own life had just changed in a matter of minutes now that she too was involved. Are you both feeling overwhelmed, frightened, feeling like there's chaos all around you? Do you feel in distress? Julia asked, ticking other boxes on her monitor to something with her hand that was behind India and Justin. Or sorry, motioning to something to someone. Yeah, to something. India and Justin looked at each other strangely. They knew their story was far fetched, but were hoping Julia would believe them and that she would help. As the two stood there, two big men in white dress scrubs with wheelchairs came in from behind. Both men pulled syringes out of their pouches they had on belts around their waist. Wait, is this. What are you doing? Justin said, starting to move toward the front door, pulling India along with him. The giant men lunged for Justin and India and grabbed them, holding hold them tight. There was a scuffle, a fight. India fell to the ground. One of the men in white on top of her. She began to scream, and Justin began to fight harder to get away from his opponent to India, to save them both. Justin punched at the man in white in the jaw, who then turned over on his back, writhing in pain. As Justin attempted to get up, he saw with his own eyes a needle to go into India's neck, and then her screaming stopped. Justin gasped and froze. Sorry, guys. As he watched one of the men pick up India, who was out cold. In a split second, a second needle went into Justin's neck. Julia Hoffman, standing right behind him, injecting him with the same medicine India was injected with, rendering him motionless, asleep. Take them both to the psychiatric room 210. Make sure they're on lockdown. These two were very interesting, Julia said as the big men in white carried Justin and India to the wheelchairs, asleep, then rolled them off back into Wincliffe. Also, see if you can find out about this Barnabas Collins of Collinsport business is all about. Julie added with her eyes firmly on the two wheelchairs, getting smaller and smaller down the brightly lit hallway. Yes, doctor, the large frame nurse eagerly. Julia felt something in the pit of her stomach. That name, that place. It was like it was meant for her to hear. It was on this night. Only Indy had no idea. She was a year early by introducing Julia to Collins' family, adding Julia Hoffman to the mix. She was supposed to be. Before, she had never even entertained entered the knowledge of the Collins family could be detrimental. She was not a part of Barnabas's plan. Arabella was not part of Barnabas's plan. Now both women were in the way of Barnabas's plan of atonement, and Barnabas did not like to be walled in, not in the slightest. Alright, guys, that's the read along. This is going to be the review. I tell you what, See what happens when your plan gets punched in the face. And now, God, I wonder if there's going to be like a murder spree. This is going to be interesting to see what Barnabas, because listen, the laws of physics are this. We can get into the laws of time travel, but I'm going to get into the laws of physics. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Barnabas's action to bring India back through time has caused Arabella's arrival. Every action caused a reaction. India, being in Victoria's body, let Barnabas out. India met Justin. India, now being in Vicky's body. She said about Julia Hoffman. Justin remembered her saying about Julia Hoffman. That's an action. That action caused them letting Barnabas out, and Justin not trusting Barnabas because he's a blood-sucking vampire, and it's like Stone Cold said, DTA, DTA. You don't trust anybody. Maybe sometimes Barnabas, unless he's really hungry. But so they go to Wincliffe, and their actions of going to Wincliffe cause Julia's reaction to, well, admit them as patients. And now the plot is gonna thicken. Straight 10. I enjoyed this. The scene setting is always really good in this blog. Um, India keeps getting into worse and worse situations. She went into from the frying pan to the fire, seemingly. At least that's what it looks like. Maybe Barnabas will get her out of the situation. Maybe her and Justin will escape. We'll see. Um, hashtag Fear Friender. Hashtag the doctor is in. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Julie Hoffman. Oh, Jesus. It's really interesting to see what's going to be, because this isn't going to just get lost in the darkness. You know what I'm saying? Elizabeth's gonna know Victoria's not there, right? Like, so it's gonna be interesting to see what happens. Does Victoria's does Elizabeth's secret get revealed because of Vicky being in the asylum? Even though she's calling herself India the Archer, she doesn't look like India. She's Victoria Winters, right? Everyone's gonna vouch that that's Victoria Winters. So it's gonna be really interesting. Justin Patterson is a really interesting character. He's really conflicted. He's in love. He's head over heels for India, but he knows she doesn't belong there. So he knows that deep down. Um, yeah, I do think he would die for her. I do think that he would risk his life for her for sure. That's just my reader's analogy, my reader's opinion. So when I talk about the blog, I'm giving my opinion, but I have fun with this. I enjoy the blog very, very much. Um, my favorite character so far, still Roger. I do like Roger. I'm starting to really dig Justin. I like India. She's got that girl's getting herself into more trouble than the original Victoria Winters did. But she's starting to, isn't she? I mean, Jesus, from one thing to the other, she really every time that girl turns around, she's getting herself into something. Which is good. You want your, you know, protagonist getting into shit, getting into trouble, getting into stuff that can get them potentially either killed or in danger. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens next week on John's blog next Monday. Link's gonna be in the description box. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys later.